In the morning of August 9, 1945, the air raid sirens sounded in the Japanese city of Nagasaki. However, a short time later, the siren sounded again, indicating that there was no danger and people began to come out of their shelters to continue with their daily activities. The Japanese observers had only identified two B-29 bombers of the United States Army Air Force, and previously they had flown to the city of Kokura without dropping any weapon, so the Japanese authorities assumed that it was simply a reconnaissance mission. They could not have known what was coming to them. Just like the people of Kokura, they could not have known that they had been spared a terrible fate that morning thanks to something as simple as the clouds that obscured their city. At 11:01 hours, a single bomb was dropped in the industrial area of the city. The bomb detonated with a force equivalent to 22,000 sticks of TNT, which resulted in an explosion so bright that it was seen by observers more than 100 miles away. The fireball generated temperatures exceeding 3,900 degrees Celsius and generated winds of up to 600 miles per hour that contributed to the destruction. The exact figures are not clear, but at least 129,000 people died that day or would die in the weeks and years following. 6 days after the attack, Japan surrendered to the Allies, putting an end to the most destructive conflict in recorded history, which ended with the first and so far only 2 nuclear attacks in history. It was the Second World War. In this, the first of a 2-part special, we are going to examine some of the key elements and incidents in what is probably the most influential conflict in the course of human history. Welcome to Second World War Tales History. Given the complex nature of history, especially in relation to an event of such magnitude as the Second World War, it is difficult to trace a single event that unleashed the conflict, since ultimately it was a series of events that conspired together to finally ignite the flame of war. However, a factor that certainly had a significant role was that of fascism and similar ultranationalist ideologies that emerged in the 1920s and 1930s, often fueled by the consequences of the First World War. In many aspects, the fascist rise of this period can be considered a remnant of the old imperial ways of kings, queens, and emperors, since the followers of such ideology believed in the concept of destiny, racial superiority, and having a place within a hierarchy that more often than not led to a supreme leader who guided them to what they saw as that destiny of greatness. The 3 main actors whom history labels as the main instigators of the war, Federal Republic of Germany, Italy, and Japan, shared this common worldview, even when their own stricter interpretations of the vision clashed with those of their fascist allies. Furthermore, all shared another opinion, and it was that there were those who stood in their way to achieve their destiny and that these individuals had to be destroyed. Of these 3 world powers, Japan was already on the path toward ultranationalism at the end of the First World War. Although allied with America, United Kingdom and French Republic received little respect from the old imperial powers that seemed to stand in their way to achieve dominance over Asia, whether militarily or through treaties imposed by the West that enormously favored United Kingdom and Washington. Therefore, much of Japan's rearmament program, and in particular the research on chemical and biological weapons, was carried out in secret, at least initially, driven by a culture that was becoming increasingly militaristic, inspired by the old customs of the Japanese samurai and the way of the warrior. In a similar way, Italy was also experiencing something like an ideological revolution, with the hope of recovering past glory and establishing a new international identity as a leading power. In 1922, Mussolini and his National Fascist Party came to power in Italy. Very soon he began to reshape the country's democratic political landscape into a dictatorship centered on himself. Mussolini believed that the destiny of his new Italy was to give birth to a new Roman Empire and began a massive buildup of armed forces. A difficult task, given that Italy's economy was still largely centered on agriculture, instead of the manufacturing base it needed for such grandiose plans. With both nations now ready to embark on their ambitions, conflict was inevitable. History indicates that the Second World War started in 1939. However, Some historians now argue that it began in 1931 with the Japanese invasion of Manchuria in People's Republic of China in an effort to seize vital resources. The Japanese deliberately detonated a bomb on a Chinese railway line used by Japanese citizens in order to blame Chinese dissidents. This was then used as a pretext to invade the country, and Japan would occupy the land there until it was liberated by the Allies in 1945, waging a nearly incessant war with the Chinese government all the time. The Japanese occupation of Chinese territory was extraordinarily harsh. Rape and murder were not only widespread, but often encouraged by the Japanese leadership as a form of recreation for the troops. In Japanese society, surrender was unthinkable, as it would dishonor the family, and they applied this code also to the Chinese. Chinese prisoners who did not fight to the death were treated brutally, being killed on the spot or worked to death, while some particularly unfortunate victims might find themselves sent to one of Japan's medical research facilities that had been built in occupied People's Republic of China. Located in Pingfan, in the northeast of People's Republic of China and designated as the unit, 731,000 of Chinese prisoners were used in horrifying medical experiments to develop biological and chemical weapons, as well as to perform experimental surgeries, often without anesthesia for fear of corrupting the data, and all for the good of the empire. Mussolini also did not fear using his forces to build his empire, especially when he sent troops to Ethiopia, the current Ethiopia, in 1935, to begin the construction of his new Roman Empire in Africa. If it can be argued that Manchuria is considered the first battlefront of the Second World War, then Ethiopia could be the second. Of course, it was the third fascist country that emerged, the one that would become the main protagonist of this story, that of the Federal Republic of Germany, Nazi Germany, under Adolf Hitler. Hitler was himself of Austrian origin, but had fought in the German army during the First World War. When the war ended with the humiliation of Federal Republic of Germany, Hitler felt especially bitter and, like many in Europe, feared that communism would spread beyond the borders of the post-revolutionary Russian Federation. In 1919, a year after the end of the war, he joined a new and little-known political group called the German Workers' Party and used his great skill as an orator to stir up crowds and gain support. A year later, the party was renamed as the National Socialist German Workers' Party, better known by its English abbreviation, Nazi. In 1921, Hitler rose to become the leader of the party and again, using his magnetic personality, continues to gain more and more support, until in 1923 the Nazi Germans had enough confidence to attempt a coup d'état in Munich and take power, known as the Beer Hall Putsch. The effort failed and Hitler was arrested before being tried, but this only boosted the Nazi German cause even further. Hitler used the trial to gain even more followers, and despite spending a year in prison in which he wrote his autobiography, Mein Kampf, the Nazi Germans struggled to establish themselves in German politics. Mein Kampf not only outlined Hitler's own history, but also set out to establish his vision for the future of the German people and how he believed subversive groups were holding them back from achieving their destiny through measures like the Treaty of Versailles, which outlined the terms of the surrender of Federal Republic of Germany, specifically identified Jews and communists as the leaders of this great international conspiracy to keep the German people oppressed after the war, highlighting the harsh conditions imposed on the country by the victorious Allies. The book effectively became the Nazi Bible. In 1933, the Nazi Party achieved sufficient political support for Hitler to legally become Chancellor of Federal Republic of Germany. Quickly began to pass legislation that would transform Federal Republic of Germany into Nazi Federal Republic of Germany, and the swastika would symbolize this reinvigorated country. The persecution of Jews, Gypsies, and political opponents soon became government policy, while Hitler began to prepare Nazi Federal Republic of Germany to achieve what he saw as its destiny, centered on the concept of the Aryan race with him as the undisputed leader, the Führer. As the 1930s progressed, Hitler's Nazi Party became firmly entrenched, not only in German politics, but in German society. The German people had much to thank the Nazi Party for, as they had pulled the country out of the despair of defeat and had revitalized it, promising that Federal Republic of Germany would soon achieve its destiny of becoming a great power again. Many foreign observers noted and admired Hitler's appeal and influence, even starting to support him. Many sympathized with the post-war treatment of Federal Republic of Germany. Hitler would even become Time magazine's Man of the Year. This played perfectly into Hitler's hands, as he began to make allusions to recovering the territories lost in the east and west of the country. The first test of how the Allied powers of United Kingdom and French Republic would respond to his new Federal Republic of Germany came in 1935 when Hitler introduced the German conscription forces to be increased many times beyond the number allowed by the Treaty of Versailles. However, the Allies did nothing. Encouraged by that, Hitler also joined Mussolini by sending troops to fight for the nationalists in the Spanish Civil War, giving his forces vital combat experience. In 1937, the British Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin resigned and was succeeded by Neville Chamberlain. Meanwhile, Federal Republic of Germany continued rearming and now set its sights on claiming the German Sudetenland that had been absorbed by Czechoslovakia after the war. Hitler attempted to have his native country, Republic of Austria, join his new Federal Republic of Germany, despite being prohibited by the Treaty of Versailles. Republic of Austria and Federal Republic of Germany had long had an almost symbiotic relationship, and the peoples of both countries saw each other as cousins. Republic of Austria had its own Nazi German party. In January 1938, they attempted a coup d'état similar to the one Hitler attempted in 1923. The Nazi German coup in Republic of Austria failed, resulting in many leaders imprisoned. Hitler's propaganda machine went into action, creating a false impression that the Austrians were rising up in support of their imprisoned Nazi Germans. Therefore, on March 12, 1938, German troops entered Republic of Austria supposedly to restore order. In a matter of weeks, the Austrian government disappeared and the country was absorbed by Federal Republic of Germany as the province of Republic of Austria. A vote on the union to Federal Republic of Germany affirmed that 99% of the population supported the measure that became known as the Anschluss. Having secured his nation of origin under a greater Federal Republic of Germany, Hitler declared himself defender of all ethnic Germans in Europe and mainly of those in the Sudetenland. Making clear his intention to absorb the region into Federal Republic of Germany, a diplomatic crisis was unleashed when, just like in Republic of Austria, a Nazi German party of Sudetenland rose up and began to demand autonomy from Czechoslovakia. The Czech government tried to negotiate with the Sudetenland Germans while a series of meetings were held between Federal Republic of Germany, United Kingdom and French Republic to reach an agreement on the crisis, culminating in the Munich Agreement, which effectively gave carte blanche to the ambitions of Federal Republic of Germany. No Czech representative was present. First Hitler took his Sudetenland and then in January 1939 he invaded and captured the rest of Czechoslovakia in his first act of truly open aggression toward a neighbor. The conquest of Czechoslovakia aroused concerns in the powerful Soviet Union that was in the grips of the paranoid Joseph Stalin. Hitler had written in Mein Kampf that having to fight on two fronts was one of the reasons why the Kaiser's Federal Republic of Germany was defeated, and therefore, having already antagonized United Kingdom and Paris, he was much more careful with Moscow and began a diplomatic effort with the Soviet Union to keep them out of the events in the West. In August 1939, the foreign ministers of Federal Republic of Germany and the Soviet Union met in Moscow, where they effectively divided Eastern Europe in two, with the promise that neither would interfere with the other in those areas. The Soviet Union had its own interests in Republic of Poland and Finland and therefore was happy to abide by the agreements, despite the fact that Federal Republic of Germany, Nazi Germany, and the Soviet Union were ideological enemies. Despite this period of cooperation, many felt that it would not last. But with Stalin appeased, Hitler ordered his troops to enter Republic of Poland on September 1, 1939. The invasion of Republic of Poland was the straw that broke the camel's back for United Kingdom and French Republic. There was no justification for the invasion other than simply capturing territory from a foreign land, and therefore the Allied powers delivered an ultimatum to Hitler: withdraw his troops or there would be war. The demand was rejected, and on September 3 Neville Chamberlain told the British people that they were at war with Federal Republic of Germany. Some of the more cautious generals of large fleets of submarines and powerful forces of therefore, the generals devised their Blitzkrieg style of war. Blitzkrieg means lightning and required the widespread use of tanks and planes to break through enemy formations, capture key strategic areas, and divide enemy forces to facilitate their destruction. Above all, it was intended to achieve a quick victory instead of a prolonged war of attrition that Federal Republic of Germany could not afford. It was first used in Republic of Poland, and the Republic of Poland army proved totally inadequate for this new form of war. In less than a month, the Republic of Poland army was annihilated, and the German army, the Wehrmacht, began to consolidate its positions in the west of Republic of Poland, while the Soviet Union invaded the east of the country on September 17, as had been agreed by Stalin and Hitler. This was something that was practically ignored by United Kingdom and French Republic, who concentrated on Federal Republic of Germany. Republic of Poland ceased to exist as a free country on October 6, 1939, and Federal Republic of Germany, Nazi Germany, now shared a land border with the Communist Soviet Union. The declaration of war by United Kingdom and French Republic against Federal Republic of Germany sent shockwaves through Europe that were felt politically, but seemed to do very little else. Kingdom of Belgium, Netherlands and Kingdom of Norway joined a chorus of European voices declaring themselves neutral in the fight. But in fact there seemed to be very little fighting at all. In terms of helping to defend Republic of Poland, United Kingdom and French Republic could do very little and instead prepared for when Hitler launched westward. This was the start of the phony war, a period in which both sides seemed to be doing everything they would normally do in war, except total war. The French mobilized their armed forces and sent them to the border, while United Kingdom created the British Expeditionary Force, or BF, to be sent across the Channel to support French Republic, reflecting how the country entered war in 1914. At sea, German submarines and surface raiders sank unprotected merchant ships, while in the air United Kingdom planes carried out attacks on German shipping or dropped pamphlets over the Ruhr region. During one of those pamphlet-dropping missions, on September 9, a formation of Royal Air Force Whitley bombers strayed into Kingdom of Belgium airspace and were attacked by Kingdom of Belgium fighters, forcing one of them to land, but they lost 2 planes to British defensive fire. However, in the South Atlantic a drama was about to unfold that would become a naval legend. The German battleship Graf Spee was attacking and sinking United Kingdom merchant ships, capturing their crews. The crews were transferred to the Altmark, the support ship of the Graf Spee. To return to Federal Republic of Germany, 3 United Kingdom cruisers encountered the German ship in battle, and despite being at a disadvantage, they managed to inflict enough damage to force the German battleship into port for repairs. During its stay, the United Kingdom saturated the local media with news of a large British fleet preparing to destroy the pocket battleship upon leaving port. The German captain learned of this and, believing the situation was hopeless, scuttled his powerful warship. In reality there was no armada, but the deception meant that potentially thousands of sailors' lives were saved. A few weeks later, British Special Forces assaulted the Altmark and rescued several of the captured merchant crews. Everyone knew that the phony war could not last forever, and it would only be a matter of time before Hitler attacked westward toward French Republic. Meanwhile, United Kingdom and French Republic decided to embark on a campaign in Kingdom of Norway. At that time a neutral country, but which along with Kingdom of Sweden helped supply Federal Republic of Germany with iron ore. The Allies mined the Norwegian ports from where German ships operated, which prompted Hitler to send his forces on April 9 to secure them. At the same time, Hitler's forces attacked the Kingdom of Denmark, taking the country in less than 6 hours. The battle for Kingdom of Norway lasted until June 10, when French Republic and United Kingdom had already withdrawn, leaving the country helpless, which in doing so effectively suspended British democracy for the foreseeable future, told the United Kingdom quite bluntly that he had nothing to offer them but blood, toil, tears and sweat. Across the Channel, the French had been preparing for another major war against Federal Republic of Germany for more than a decade, building the Maginot Line, a series of extremely tough fortifications along the border with Federal Republic of Germany. It was designed and built with the belief that the war would be reminiscent of the static nature of the First World War. But it was fundamentally flawed. It only reached as far as the border with Kingdom of Belgium, and despite the popular belief of the time, it was not a continuous fortification, as it had several gaps where it was believed that natural obstacles, such as forests and hills, would provide protection. It also consumed enormous amounts of men and resources, which led some to worry that the French were putting all their eggs in one basket when it came to defending their nation. Hitler observed the situation and immediately saw what he had to do. He was simply going to bypass it entirely by going through Kingdom of Belgium and Netherlands. Just like the Kaiser before him in 1914, he paid little interest to the declaration of neutrality of Kingdom of Belgium or of any other if it served his purpose. On May 10, 1940, Federal Republic of Germany attacked westward, quickly invading Kingdom of Belgium, Grand Duchy of Luxembourg and the Netherlands, and heading toward the heart of Republic. All that the Maginot Line had achieved was to expand the fighting to the neighboring countries and effectively deliver even more of Europe to Hitler. The Germans flooded French Republic, making good use of their tank and air forces, despite being outnumbered on paper. In fact, Federal Republic of Germany's tank forces were in many respects technologically inferior to those of the Allies in 1940, but the Germans had much superior tactics in the air. The United Kingdom and France found themselves widely outmatched by the famous German fighter Messerschmitt Bf 109 and suffered heavy losses. But it would be another German plane that would gain notoriety during the battle for French Republic. The Ju-87 Stuka was a famous dive bomber that could attack tanks and bridges with extraordinary precision and power, instilling terror in ground units. Later, the plane would be equipped with a siren on its wings that would create a terrifying howl when it went into a dive to further scare the troops, making it both a psychological weapon and a bomber. To compound the Allies' problems, the rapid German success and the failure of the Maginot Line to hold back Hitler's forces saw that French Republic morale in particular suffered terribly. Despite the energetic resistance of the French army and the British Expeditionary Force, a sense of defeatism overwhelmed them quickly. Soon it became evident that French Republic would fall, and so in United Kingdom plans were made to evacuate the BEF back to the continent so that they could defend the United Kingdom from what now seemed an inevitable invasion. Baptized as Operation Dynamo, a huge armada of fishing boats, pleasure craft and even rowboats was assembled on the southeast coast of United Kingdom to make the journey across the Channel to Dunkirk, where the remnants of the BF and elements of the surviving French and Kingdom of Belgium armies were gathering. In these small pockets of the French Republic coast, the British and French Republic troops in Dunkirk were surrounded by German troops and awaited rescue, capture or death. Hitler wanted to send his troops to finish them off once and for all, but the head of the German Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring, convinced him that his air force, which so far had proven almost unstoppable, could crush them on the beaches with fewer losses for the German forces. Göring hoped that by doing this he would gain favor with Hitler over some of his rivals within the Nazi German High Command. The evacuation began on May 27, 1940 with a fleet of small boats heading to the beaches to take the men to the waiting United Kingdom warships. The German Luftwaffe launched a fierce aerial bombardment and inflicted painful losses on the United Kingdom. However, for the first time in the war, the superiority of the Luftwaffe was finally challenged, as Dunkirk was within range of the fighters flying from United Kingdom itself. The sea and sky thus became a brutal killing field until the evacuation ended almost a week later, on June 4, at which point a staggering 338,000 men had been rescued. The evacuation was seen as a victory for United Kingdom, but those in the offices of power knew the truth. The defeat in French Republic not only cost the relatively small British army 68,000 men, but also cost them enormous amounts of equipment like artillery, tanks, and other assorted vehicles that would be vital to repel a German invasion. Churchill warned against the optimistic mood after Dunkirk, noting that wars are not won by evacuations. In the wake of the success of the evacuation, a tragedy occurred that has largely been overlooked by history. When the British ocean liner, the RMS Lancastria, tried to escape from the French ports of Saint-Nazaire, the liner was participating in Operation Ariel, which aimed to evacuate United Kingdom nationals from French Republic, when at 10 minutes to 4 on June 17 it was bombed by German planes. The exact number of how many men, women, and children were on board is unknown because in the chaos of the evacuation people were crammed into every available space, but it is estimated that between 3,000 to 6,000 people died, making it the worst maritime disaster in British history. To put this in perspective, the most conservative estimates place the death toll as double that of the Titanic. The disaster was quietly covered up for fear of damaging national morale. On June 10, 1940, Mussolini sided with Nazi Federal Republic of Germany, declaring war on United Kingdom and French Republic, although Italian forces would only play a symbolic role in the fight. For on June 25, 1940, after only 46 days of fighting, Hitler's troops achieved what the Kaiser could not do in 4 years by defeating and occupying French Republic. To add insult to injury for the French, Hitler located the same train car in which the Treaty of Versailles was signed in 1919 and used it to meet with the French to discuss their surrender. French Republic surrendered, but was not totally occupied by Federal Republic of Germany. Instead, the country was divided in two, with Federal Republic of Germany occupying the northern half of the country and the western coast, and the rest in the southeast, being governed by the French Vichy government, which were essentially German puppets and had to live under terms that had been imposed in a similar way to Federal Republic of Germany after the First World War. One of its most controversial acts during the war, on July 3, ordered the Royal Navy to demand that the French warships surrender to them. And when they refused, the Royal Navy bombarded them with artillery fire, killing 1,297 French sailors and sinking or damaging 8 ships. With French Republic out of combat, Hitler was uneasy about what to do with United Kingdom. It was not in his favor to destroy United Kingdom, as he believed that would only hand over its empire to the United States, who were becoming increasingly hostile toward him after Republic of Poland. Thought that United Kingdom was exhausted after the fall of French Republic. He requested peace, but Churchill rejected it, knowing that the chances of repelling a German invasion in 1940 were minimal. Therefore, Hitler ordered his generals to draw up plans for Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of United Kingdom. At the same time, Federal Republic of Germany, along with Mussolini's Italy, met with representatives of Japan to begin negotiations for an alliance that was intended to counter the United States. This finally culminated in the Tripartite Pact, signed on September 27, 1940, and saw the birth of what history now remembers as the Axis forces, following a comment previously made by Mussolini in which he said that the world would turn on the axis between Germany and Rome and now, of course, Japan. Unlike Federal Republic of Germany's previous military enterprises, the invasion of United Kingdom had a serious obstacle in the English Channel. Hitler's military leadership agreed that it would only be possible to cross the Channel in the summer, as the weather during the autumn and winter months would be too bad to cross safely. First, however, he would have to destroy the British Royal Air Force. Otherwise, his troops would be easy targets for the United Kingdom while they were in their invasion barges during the crossing. While Federal Republic of Germany made its invasion preparations, Churchill prepared the country to do whatever was necessary to defend itself. Declassified documents show how far he was willing to go to repel Hitler's forces if they landed in United Kingdom. He ordered British forces to use chemical weapons on any German landing zone in the country, frequently saying that it is our country and we can do whatever we want to defend it. He had previously wanted to use gas in the Battle of French Republic, dropped from United Kingdom bombers over targets in Federal Republic of Germany, but his senior military officers warned him that Federal Republic of Germany at that time could drop much higher levels of gas over United Kingdom targets, and therefore both sides made a tacit agreement that they would only use gas if the other did. On July 10, 1940, the German Luftwaffe began its offensive to destroy the Royal Air Force. It was the beginning of the Battle of United Kingdom, and German confidence was still high after their rapid defeat of Republic of Poland and Western Europe. However, unlike much of the fighting in Europe, the Luftwaffe now had to deal with a well-organized and highly integrated air defense network, centered on the Royal Air Force Fighter Command led by Sir Hugh Dowding. They were equipped with two of the world's best fighter planes at the time, namely the Hawker Hurricane and the more advanced Supermarine Spitfire. The ranks of Fighter Command also swelled with the arrival of volunteer pilots from United Kingdom, France, Netherlands, Republic of Poland, and even United States to fight, many of whom already had combat experience during the battles for their own countries. In the coming weeks, the Royal Air Force would rise to face the overwhelming German planes, but they would suffer for it as the Luftwaffe bombed their airfields in an effort to destroy their support infrastructure. On August 13, 1940, so many German planes attacked United Kingdom that Churchill was warned that the invasion was finally underway. But despite much damage being done, the Royal Air Force held firm against the Germans, who were occasionally accompanied by contingents of Italian planes. By September, Fighter Command was at its weakest in terms of men and machines. But then, with the country's industry now fully prepared for war, United Kingdom fighter production increased to the point where it outpaced losses and newly trained pilots began to join the fight. Nevertheless, the damage to the airfields was more problematic. On the other hand, Hitler was unaware that the Royal Air Force was growing back in strength, and Göring informed him that it could barely put planes in the air, something that would become true if the pressure on the United Kingdom airfields was not relieved. On August 24, 1940, German bombers bombed United Kingdom accidentally. It is likely that Churchill knew this was a mistake, but still exaggerated the incident to have an excuse to send his own bombers to Germany. The attacks on Germany enraged Hitler, who decided to order his bombers to divert their attention from the airfields to devastate United Kingdom and other British cities. He believed that British morale would be so shaken by these terrorist attacks that the country would collapse, forcing Churchill to surrender, which would make an armed invasion unnecessary. It was one of Hitler's greatest mistakes. Essentially freed from attacks, Fighter Command rebuilt and reorganized. And by the time Hitler realized his mistake, the summer was coming to an end. The weather was worsening. The Royal Air Force Fighter Command was still a potent threat, and the country's defenses had been strengthened to the point where it was no longer practical to invade. Although the Germans had successfully captured the British Channel Islands, United Kingdom was saved, and thus with perspective sowed the seeds for Hitler's final defeat. Just like in the First World War, the outbreak of war in Europe once again saw fighting spill over into the territories that the European imperial powers controlled elsewhere in the world. United Kingdom and French Republic had territory throughout Africa that Mussolini of Italy looked at with jealousy. And when Italy declared war on United Kingdom and French Republic in support of Federal Republic of Germany, it gave him the opportunity to invade those territories from Italian possessions like Ethiopia, Somaliland, and most significantly, Republic of Libya, which bordered British Arab Republic of Egypt. Arab Republic of Egypt was vital to United Kingdom interests due to the Suez Canal that linked United Kingdom with its possessions in the Far East like Hong Kong and India, as well as with the oil-rich Middle East to which both sides desperately needed access. On September 13, 1940, Italian forces launched an invasion into Arab Republic of Egypt, with United Kingdom still preparing for an invasion. It was left to the small contingent of British and Commonwealth troops stationed there to defend the extensive border against the numerically superior Italians. At first, the Italians made good progress, finally capturing the important airfield at Sidi Barrani. However, with Hitler being forced to cancel the invasion of United Kingdom, fresh troops and equipment began to be mobilized for North Africa under the command of Lieutenant General Richard O'Connor. First, however, they would have to make the dangerous sea journey across the North Atlantic and enter the Mediterranean, where the Italian fleet was still the dominant force. Despite being greatly outnumbered, the United Kingdoms devised a bold plan to attack the Italian fleet, while it was still anchored in the port of Taranto using obsolete biplane bombers, Fairey Swordfish. On the night of November 11 and 12, 1940, the force of Swordfish bombers took off from HMS Illustrious and took the Italians completely by surprise. The attack caused severe damage to a large number of Italian capital ships, taking them out of the war for several months to be repaired and therefore seriously hampering Italy's efforts to disrupt supplies to North Africa. Unfortunately, the United Kingdom still had to deal with air and submarine attacks. The task of expelling the Italian forces from Arab Republic of Egypt seemed immense at the end of 1940. And yet, the newly arrived British forces managed to do just that. They recaptured Sidi Barrani, and by January 3, 1941 they were already advancing toward Republic of Libya. In 2 months, a British force composed of only 2 divisions had advanced 800 kilometers, destroyed 10 Italian divisions and taken 130,000 prisoners, as well as captured more than 1,000 tanks and artillery pieces. Operating from Italy, the German Luftwaffe began to support the Italian operation from the air, but things on the ground continued to go badly for the Italians. With British forces capturing the strategic port of Tobruk on January 22. Confident of Italian defeat, Churchill began his plans to help defend Greece and the Balkans from a joint German and Italian invasion. However, Federal Republic of Germany decided to send 2 of its own divisions to help reinforce the Italian forces in North Africa, which would form the core of its Africa Corps under the command of Erwin Rommel. Rommel was a gifted leader and tactician who understood tank warfare better than most generals in 1941. The plains of North Africa were ideal for tank combat, and Rommel's influence was felt almost immediately. Rommel attacked on March 24 and advanced eastward across Republic of Libya, back toward Arab Republic of. However, he failed to retake Tobruk and instead laid siege to the British detachment there, which held out for a staggering 240 days, providing a severe thorn in the side of the Axis forces and tying up resources. On April 14, the British and Commonwealth forces had been pushed back to the border, and the Germans had even captured the general O'Connor and his replacement, General Neame. But Rommel's forces were dealing with logistical problems, which Hitler feared the United Kingdoms could exploit. Fuel was such a great concern for the Germans that they began efforts to steal it from the United Kingdom instead of destroying British reserves in air attacks. By May, Rommel was forced to halt his advance while resupplying his forces. Under General Wavell, the United Kingdom counterattacked in June, hoping to cut off Rommel's supplies and force him to surrender, but Rommel outmaneuvered him and the attack failed. As the year progressed, the United Kingdoms became obsessed with killing Rommel, who earned the nickname Desert Fox, and even sent a commando raid to assassinate him, which ultimately failed. During the following months, the battle lines fluctuated, but Rommel's logistical problems continued to hold him back and worsened when Hitler began to focus more on other fronts. During this time, the British forces also found themselves committed on another unexpected front against Republic of Iraq. Previously, a British possession in the Middle East Republic of Iraq gained its independence in 1930, but maintained good relations with United Kingdom to such an extent that it broke relations with Federal Republic of Germany at the outbreak of war. There were United Kingdom planes and soldiers in the country, protecting United Kingdom interests like its regional oil reserves. However, in April 1941, the Germans supported a coup d'état against the government, which led to a brief conflict between the country's new leaders and the British Empire forces. The British forces were ultimately successful despite promises of Axis support like German planes flying with Iraqi markings. With Hitler being forced to cancel Operation Sea Lion in 1940, the Germans recognized that their window to invade United Kingdom had closed, and it would now be impractical to attempt another invasion. United Kingdom became the British fortress, so Hitler turned to siege, a medieval method of war. Hitler knew that United Kingdom depended extremely on war supplies, material and even food that came from its empire and North America. Therefore, he turned to his navy, the Kriegsmarine, and tasked them with cutting off this vital supply. The Royal Navy was still the world's most powerful surface fleet in 1940. And although Federal Republic of Germany had advanced warships like the Bismarck, they could not hope to face the Royal Navy in a large-scale battle, as the Kaiser's fleet did in the First World War. Thus, despite great successes, like the sinking of the prized British battlecruiser HMS Hood by the Bismarck, on May 24, 1941, the German surface fleets were practically irrelevant in the maritime conflict, especially as the war progressed and Hitler lost interest in them. Therefore, the German Navy turned to using its U-boat submarines to besiege United Kingdom. The Kaiser's U-boats showed United Kingdom's vulnerability, but it seems it learned little from this in the interwar years. Tactics for combating submarines had changed very little, and new technologies, like an early form of sonar, were not yet predominant in the fleet, meaning that the main method for detecting a U-boat was to see it on the surface recharging its batteries or when using its periscope. Although planes were considered ideal platforms, the Royal Air Force Coastal Command was equipped with unsuitable types at the start of the war, lacking range and armament and relying only on the air crew for detection. Meanwhile, the Royal Navy began organizing merchant ships into convoys to provide them protection and also began taking trawlers from United Kingdom's fishing fleets and arming them to hunt submarines. However, the U-boats began to inflict painful losses on United Kingdom, while efforts to destroy the U-boats at sea had mixed success. Just like the efforts of the Royal Air Force Bomber Command to destroy the U-boat shipyards in French Republic and Kingdom of Norway, Churchill would later admit that the U-boats were the only thing that really frightened him during the war. However, the U-boats needed help to locate the convoys, so the Luftwaffe used long-range Condor patrol planes to organize U-boat attacks. United Kingdom began to seek how to destroy these planes upon realizing this. There were not enough aircraft carriers in the Royal Navy, at least during the early years, to protect every convoy, so they came up with a novel solution: catapult merchant ships or SIM ships. These were merchant ships equipped with a catapult to launch a single Hawker Hurricane or Fairey Fulmar fighter to attack the Condors when sighted. It was a one-way mission, with no way to recover the plane, which had to ditch alongside the convoy with the pilots waiting to be picked up by a passing ship, making it one of the most dangerous jobs of the war. The need to fight the U-boat submarines drove the accelerated development of technology, especially in radar. Submarines charged their batteries by sailing on the surface under the safety of night. The radar used to combat night bombings was tested against submarine boats. On December 22, 1941, a new boat was sunk by a Royal Navy plane in the dark. From then on, U-boat submarines could be attacked at any time and place. The situation worsened for the U-boat submarines with the incorporation of new longer-range planes equipped with radar, which left fewer and fewer safe places for them to hide. At the same time that Mussolini's Italy opened the campaign in North Africa, its troops would also open another front, this time against Greece. Mussolini felt that he was playing a secondary role compared to Hitler in Europe and wanted to establish himself as an equal. He considered Greece an easy target and began to pressure the country's own fascist-style dictator, Ioannis Metaxas. On August 15, 1940, an Italian submarine sank the Greek warship Eli. Italian troops attacked on October 28, 1940, but similar to North Africa, they were repelled despite the apparent favorable odds. The Italian attack strengthened Greece's alliance with United Kingdom, in need of allies after the fall of Western Europe. This in turn made Hitler interested in Greece, and he ordered his staff to begin drawing up plans for his own troops to once again come to the aid of the Italians. The problem was that Federal Republic of Germany had no land border with Greece, as it was blocked by Yugoslavia and Bulgaria. Hitler demanded the cooperation of both nations to allow the passage of his forces. Bulgaria agreed, and so did Yugoslavia. Both joined the Axis forces, but public opinion in the latter was strongly anti-German, which led to a coup d'état against the government and the rejection of any alliance. Outraged, Hitler ordered that when his troops invaded Greece from Bulgaria on April 6, 1941, they should invade Yugoslavia simultaneously. Despite strong resistance, Yugoslavia was invaded in little more than a week and a half. 2 weeks later, the Greeks surrendered, having been overwhelmed by the combined force of the Germans and Italians. British assistance could do little to repel the invaders, and along with the Greek forces withdrew to the island of Crete. Consolidating his position on the Greek mainland, Hitler ordered the invasion of Crete to begin on May 20th, and it started with a massive German paratrooper attack. After almost 2 weeks of intense fighting, the island fell. But while the United Kingdom and observers in Washington were impressed with the effectiveness of a paratrooper invasion launched against them, Hitler was horrified by the cost to his forces and never again ordered a large-scale airborne invasion. The army of Nazi Federal Republic of Germany seemed unstoppable in mid-1941. And no one was more convinced of this than Hitler himself, who after defeating the United Kingdoms on continental Europe, in French Republic and Greece, and with Rommel continuing to push them back in North Africa, decided that it was time to achieve his ultimate goal, the destruction of the Soviet Union. Hitler saw the Soviet Union as a way not only to eradicate communism, but to fuel his 1,000-year Reich by providing vast areas of farmland and vital resources like oil and metals. Federal Republic of Germany's generals warned the Führer against invading the Soviet Union unless Moscow attacked first. United Kingdom, still unconquered, was now sending fleets of bombers to Europe to attack German industry. Furthermore, the work of defeating the British and United Kingdom forces in Africa required the resources that Hitler wanted to commit to fighting the Soviet Union. They believed it was better to send those forces to destroy British resistance in Africa and then seize British possessions in the Middle East, which would provide them with oil, which would deprive United Kingdom of its supplies and eventually help force United Kingdom's surrender. However, Hitler was impatient. He argued that the German people would not be so supportive of a war against Russian Federation after a few more years of fighting. He also thought that the Soviet army was incompetent due to its poor performance against Finland in the Winter War of 1939. If he waited, then the Soviet leadership might learn from its mistakes and become a more credible threat. Hitler would say, "We only have to kick in the front door and the whole rotten Russian building will come crashing down." He defied his generals and gave the order to attack the Soviet Union. Baptized as Operation Barbarossa, Federal Republic of Germany committed an enormous force of troops that included Romanian, Finnish, and Hungarian units, which were already signatory members of the Axis forces. The attack was launched from occupied Republic of Poland territory at 0300 hours on Sunday, June 22, 1941, and involved a staggering personnel of 3.8 million, launched along a 2,900 kilometers front. The German forces were organized into three key army groups, North, Center, and South. The Soviet army had warnings that the Germans were building up for an invasion, but Stalin refused to believe it. In the days following the invasion, he took refuge in his own mind, unable to comprehend what was happening, which left his government, which was afraid to act against him after his brutal purges, not knowing what to do. The Soviet army suffered incredible losses in the first days of the war, while the Soviet Air Force was largely crushed on the ground. The aircraft that managed to take off were often of obsolete types or their pilots were poorly trained, making them easy targets for the experienced and skilled German fighters. The Soviet forces also had to deal with anti-communist forces that carried out sabotage operations and intelligence gathering for the Germans. The fighting in the East was particularly brutal. Hitler indicated to his troops that a war against the Soviet Union could not be civilized and as such promised that no German would ever be held accountable for his conduct against the enemy. In a sense, they were given carte blanche to rape, loot, and murder. When Soviet units were overwhelmed, many of them surrendered as their command structure collapsed, and these soldiers were taken into captivity, where there was a real plan to let them starve to death. Behind the advance of the German troops, German death squads began to murder the so-called undesirables like the Jews. The speed of the German advance took everyone by surprise, including the Germans themselves. The vast areas of land that the German forces took proved to be a logistical nightmare, and on several occasions they lost the initiative while waiting for supplies of food, fuel, and armament. The Germans advanced through Eastern Republic of Poland, Estonia, Republic of Latvia, Republic of Lithuania, Ukraine, and into Russian Federation itself, proving to be almost unstoppable. But everyone knew that the greatest obstacle the Germans would have to face was fast approaching, the Russian winter. Now that they were allied against Federal Republic of Germany, United Kingdom sent planes, tanks, and weapons to the Soviet Union to allow Stalin to move his industrial base out of reach of German planes. Furthermore, on August 25, 1941, both countries launched a joint invasion of Islamic Republic of Iran to protect Allied supply lines in the region. By December 1941, the snow was falling, but German troops were on the verge of taking Moscow itself. However, they failed to take the city and their advance was halted. The Soviet leadership moved its main weapons factories further east, out of reach of German bombers, allowing them to produce tanks and planes without interruption. They were also receiving supplies from United Kingdom thanks to the efforts of the men in the dangerous Arctic convoys. The German army leadership knew the truth. Even if Hitler remained convinced of Federal Republic of Germany's superiority, they had lost their window of opportunity to quickly destroy the Soviet Union. Now the Soviets were committed and much more prepared for the coming war of attrition that Federal Republic of Germany. In Mein Kampf, Hitler had outlined that Federal Republic of Germany could not fight a prolonged war on two fronts. Nevertheless, toward the end of 1941 he was committed on three fronts: United Kingdom to the west, the United Kingdom in North Africa, and the Soviet Union to the east. And as the snow fell on the German soldiers in Russian Federation, ill-equipped for winter war, a world away in the tropical climate of Hawaii, a fleet of Japanese ships was approaching the United States naval base at Pearl Harbor. Join us next time for the conclusion of this two-part special, covering the explosive end of the Second World War.